working session meeting. We use the working session process as a way to consider agenda items as one large committee for the purposes of discussion and debate in full view of the public. It is not a time for the public to engage with the board, rather a time for the public to observe the work of the various committees. So before we begin tonight, just wanted to take a moment to recognize this week and its importance. It is Teacher Appreciation Week, and I know that the board agrees with me in how much we appreciate our teachers. This past year would not have been feasible without all the dedicated, compassionate, driven teachers we have in this district. Without skipping a beat, they picked up this new version of learning while keeping our students' needs at the center of their approach. It was an unconventional year, and I sincerely hope we never have to revisit it, but we thank all of our teachers for their work. So moving on to tonight's meeting, we have a pretty big agenda with a lot of time-sensitive issues. Curriculum will be presenting cyber options for the 2021-22 school year. Finance will be presenting the budget for this upcoming school year. Dr. Lloyd will be updating the board on district goals and so on. Because there is so much that the board needs to get through tonight, I am requesting that all chairs hold on public questions until the end of the meeting. I always encourage chairs to ask for public questions on agenda items after they present, but because committees need time to review and discuss these topics, I am asking chairs to take questions at the end. And then if there is always opportunity to email the board with questions, I always try to respond back within a few days. And if I don't have the answers, I'm always happy to help find the answers or to connect individuals with the appropriate administrator to have these questions answered. And then just so everyone's aware, if you haven't been to, we're now calling these working session meetings, I keep wanting to say committee meetings. We typically, when we go to a specific committee, we'll ask everyone that's not on the committee to turn their camera off and to mute just so that the specific committee can be on camera and can be seen doing their work. So the first item, or the second item tonight is going to be for the full board. So we're going to just review the 2021 school board committees. So just so everyone is aware, the board decided to consolidate committees. We put committees together that we felt like overlapped work. We have now finance and buildings and grounds. We have curriculum and special education combined together. We have personnel and then legislative and policy. So there are new committee structures for everyone. And these new committee structures, I spoke with Brian Suber, they would come into effect for after this meeting. And for the May meeting on the 17th, our four new committees will be giving board reports. Is everyone okay with that? Any questions?
Nope. Sounds good.
All right. We're gonna move on to item 3, which is Curriculum and Instruction Committee. I have the chair as Lydia Stutzman, the vice chair as Kathy DiMarino, and then I have Paul Friel and John Melnizak on the committee.
Thank you, Madam President. I will quickly hand over the time that we have tonight to Dr. Soter. I know we have a textbook to consider and then also the cyber plan to review. So Dr. Soter, it's off to you.
Thank you. Our first item is a textbook. It's the marketing management textbook. And board members, I put the online information for this for you in board lines so that you have the opportunity to peruse the book. Of course, it is here in the office if anyone wishes to come in and review it. This is part of our secondary electives, and this course will be running next school year at the high school. So if I can have a motion to move that to the full board.
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Mr. San Francisco, if you could bring up our presentation this evening. We're going to be talking just briefly about our cyber plans for next year. And as you know, we have been talking about cyber learning for quite some time. And this has been a very different year for us. And we are going to be looking at things in the coming year different from what we did this year. Our administrators have been planning, and we're at that point where we are ready to be more fully involving our school community and our teachers in what we would like to be doing next year and getting the word out about our plans for next year. You might recall that last summer when we talked about our Cyber Academy, we had some unique needs to address for the current school year. And one of the most important ones for that was the need to be fully engaging our students if they had to be at home, if they were quarantined, for example, or if their families were choosing for them to be at home, if they were going to be engaged in remote learning throughout the year. And so with that in mind, we planned a learning environment for the students that would be synchronous at the secondary level. And of course, that meant that our secondary teachers had to be in 2 learning environments throughout the entire year. And that is something that we are looking to change. Of course, last year, like all years, we want our students to be able to have access to that full program of studies. And so these were some of the variables that we were working with for the current year. We know that next year, based on our survey results, and you can advance this if you would, Mr. San Francisco, based on our survey results, that we have families who are very interested in remaining in a cyber learning environment. We already have 80 families that would make a choice to go to a cyber charter school if we don't continue some form of cyber learning for their children. So with that in mind, we have a proposed plan for our secondary students, for our secondary cyber academy. We want them to be able to be involved in all that O&J Roberts has to offer with athletics and activities and our services. We are going to be focusing on our cyber students learning asynchronously. This seemed to be more of the desire for our students who were in our cyber programming. Secondary students would be working asynchronously. We would be looking at a combination of classes from our program of studies that are taught by our own teachers, as well as courses that are administered through either Edgenuity or BBA if it's a course that we don't yet have available in our program of studies, or we don't have it fully developed for our students to have asynchronously. It would allow students to have classes in that hybrid ability, taking some classes online, taking some classes in person if they wish. We have students doing that now, and so this would continue for our secondary students. At the elementary level, we would be looking for a slightly different plan for next year. And if you can show us that, Mr. San Francisco. Thanks. So our elementary plan would be for grades 3 to 6. We'd be looking at synchronous sessions like this year. Big change for next year, again, grades 3 to 6. We would be looking to be making use of our current ELA and mathematics programming. You know that we made use of Accelerate this year, and we would be wishing to return to everyday mathematics, even for our students who were in cyber, as well as our reading and writing program from Teachers College, Reading and Writing Project out of Columbia University. So we would be, rather than using Accelerate, we would be returning to what we are currently using in our in-person classes. Another change for elementary is we really endeavored to section the students into classes within their own school. So if a family from West Vincent was in our cyber program, we tried to have them with other children from West Vincent with a teacher from West Vincent. We know just with the numbers that we would be pulling teachers and students from across the district. So our class sections would come from teachers and students all across the school district. Our schedule would be similar to this year. Students would follow a grade level for their core area and special area classes. And we would be looking for our families to have a longer commitment to being in our cyber program. We would want them remaining ideally for the full year. Because we would be having students in cyber and students in person, and we want to minimize those transitions between them, we would be looking for our families to make a commitment for the full year. Resources that we would be looking at for the coming year. We've talked about some of these already. We know that we need some infrastructure in place with administration. We need a cyber principal to continue the development and supervision of a cyber academy. We have support services. Some of this is existing. Some of this would need to be new for that program. Obviously, we need technology services, school counseling, and special education. We have academic supports in place for many of our students now. We would need to be making sure those are in place in a cyber academy. Devices for the students, anybody who would need those kinds of technology devices or technology assistance, we need to be providing that. We know that our instructional resources would be developed by our own teachers to the extent that we can. And if we need to get course content from another vendor or from BVA, we would be looking to do that. Our administrators know that we have some management, some policies and procedures that are in place in school that we need to update for our cyber academy. When we look at other vendors for online content, we have been researching Edgenuity, and this offers a lot of flexibility for us. This is currently used by Brandywine Virtual Academy. This is one of the vendors that we actually looked at also last year. This can be used with or without teacher facilitators from O&J Roberts. So we could be using this for courses that we need or courses that we need assistance with, either the full course or facilitated by Edgenuity. We can evaluate and update those terms each year, and we have a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of options for us while we are developing our own courses by modifying or adapting what is already available. So when we look at sort of the changes from the current year, we are really looking to reduce or completely eliminate the need to have those two learning environments at our secondary level. Increase our asynchronous cyber options for secondary students because that has been a request. Increase the options for students for their current online courses that we offer from our high school specifically. We also had requests to increase the use of our current elementary instructional materials so that those would be used in our cyber program rather than accelerate. And a big one, we really want to decrease the number of students going between the cyber environment and the in-person environment. We really would be looking for families to make a commitment for a longer amount of time. So our recommendation moving forward is that we continue with the training that we are receiving right now from the Chester County Intermediate Unit for our asynchronous course development. Because to this point, most of our cyber classes have not been in an asynchronous environment. They've actually been in a synchronous environment. And so preparing module-based instruction is very different from what we've been doing. So we're going to be leaning on the intermediate unit to be providing that training for our teachers and be doing some turnaround training in our for our teachers for asynchronous course development. That will continue over the summer. We've started that, and that's going to be continuing over the summer. You might recall that when I prepared the curriculum development budget that was presented to the committee earlier in the winter, we talked about course development and professional development this summer for cyber learning. So we are definitely going to want to move forward for that. We're going to be looking at the staff that's necessary for Cyber Academy, the infrastructure that would be needed in order to run this for our students and our teachers, partnering with Edgenuity or BVA for course content if needed. And lastly, we're going to be registering and scheduling our students for classes. So in the coming weeks, we will be preparing information to go out to families and sharing how they can learn about the program and learn about how they would register students for it.
Dr. Sutter, you said in the coming weeks, then I'm assuming what would be the cutoff in order to allow you appropriate time to then staff, know what we need in order to staff this appropriately?
We're going to be releasing that communications plan literally tomorrow. So we will have a timeline for our families, and that our administrative team is meeting tomorrow to really solidify when we would want that. One of the things to keep in mind is that this program is going to look different at the elementary level, at the middle school level, at the high school level. And so some of those dates and necessary details are going to be different at the elementary level, at the middle school level, at the high school level. We will have more flexibility, literally depending on the level of the learner. So this could be a very fluid process for us over the next couple of months, but we will be solidifying that communications plan for families tomorrow.
So Mrs. Stutzman, I just want to clarify, we're not releasing that plan tomorrow. We are developing that plan tomorrow. Once the board votes at the end of this month to continue the Cyber Academy for next year, then we will be able to begin communicating with parents.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Is the intention of your, Kathy, I know you said we're looking for a commitment up front, but you're also saying our students in ONJ high school, or maybe middle school and high school, will have the opportunity to be both in person and asynchronous. So would I just be committing to taking, like, you know, whatever class I'm going to do asynchronously for the year or the semester at a time? Is that?
Yes, ideally, yes, because some of our students especially are going to want to come in for some of those hands-on courses. Lots of our students right now, even if they have an online component to their program, they're coming in for their music class or their art class or the horticulture class. That's very common, and we would want that to continue.
Right. So I don't have to be a cyber student or an in-person student. I just got to be whichever classes I'm committing to, that I'm committing to that class for the full one of the classes.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
No, it's good.
And the Cyber Academy principal, is that going to be a principal for all the grades in from, you know, first to 12th?
Yes.
Okay.
Ideally, we would be looking for that. Yes.
And would that be someone who's already one of our principals, or are we going to look at creating this position?
It would be my recommendation that we utilize one of our existing principals.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you anticipate having any issues with elementary having a few like certain grade levels that don't have a full class size? And, you know, will we have a minimum enrollment per grade?
We've talked about a couple of different options for that in our early surveys. It would appear that we would have enough based on our preliminary surveys, but we have talked about some options if that would become an issue, about doing some things that might be multi-grade and then sharing between two teachers for it. So we do have some options for how we might handle that, but our early numbers from our survey give us the impression that we probably would be okay having a minimum.
So how would the special area staffing work? Because you'd have to have, you know, all those specialists.
Right. So that is a bit of a numbers challenge. And how we did that this year is all of our special area teachers had both in-person classes and synchronous cyber classes. So those classes could be just simply scheduled simply the way that they are now. It just might not be a teacher from the same school that the students currently are in. And we had that go on this year as well.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Thanks.
Any other questions from the committee?
Not
And
me.
not from
Good.
the rest of the board?
Yeah, just one quick question, Kathy, on students who are in person and cyber, and we have a principal, how's the communication going to work to parent? I mean, who's ultimately responsible and who's the principal? So I'm a high school student and I have, you know, 2 asynchronous classes and 2 classes in. Am I splitting communication? Like, what's the communication look like?
Great question. I would anticipate that students are going to, a high school student who is in both environments is going to get information about the school and what is going on in the school from the current principal. And the principal for the cyber is going to be communicating with the cyber teachers. So I think that that's really what you're going to see for students who are in some classes in and some classes in person and some classes in cyber.
John, I think you had your hand up first. Do you have a question?
Yeah, and in terms of, and maybe Jackie needs to assist on this as well, Kathy, but the financial end of this. So if we're going to be hiring a teacher, and obviously we probably have some technology commitments, you mentioned Edgenuity. Is this something that we can use the ESSER's funding for? Does it qualify?
It does. I'm happy to jump in. I just think we need to know that moving forward, it would be a board commitment once the ESSER's funds go away. So, you know, after the 3-year period, 2 or 3 year period, it would be something that if we retain it would have to be built into the budget. But yes, it qualifies.
Jennifer?
I apologize if this was covered and I missed it, but so for elementary, the slide said 3 to 6. So what exactly was the K-2 solution? Is there a cyber solution for them?
We are currently planning for elementary for grades 3 through 6. There are so many interventions right now and services in place for K-2. We genuinely believe that it would be in our best interest to serve those students in person. And so right now we are creating a cyber plan for grades 3 through 12. So 3 through 6 at elementary.
Okay, so you also referred to survey results. So am I to assume that the survey results did not show a strong demand for K-2?
We had a much larger demand beginning with grade 3. Yes.
All right. Thank you for clarifying.
Any other questions?
Nope.
I was just going to comment that I think it's exciting that we're able to start using our own curriculum for cyber for these younger kids. You know, I have younger kids, and Accelerate was not the greatest experience. So I'm excited that we'll be able to use our curriculum. So.
It checked off a lot of boxes for us, given the environment that we needed to create this year, but we think we can do better.
Yeah, I think it's great too. It's and especially with the development of new over the summer, which is great. So, Dr. Soder, what do you need from us to push forward, just to take the plan to the full board to then approve that?
That's correct.
So,
That's
do I motion to do so?
yes, please.
I'll motion to do it.
Second.
Yeah, thank you. We'll bring it to the next board meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you for all your hard work on it, Dr. Soder.
Yes, thank you. And with that, I think the curriculum and instruction committee's done, and we're going to building and grounds.
All right, thank you very much. For the meeting tonight, we have 2 things on the agenda, both of which are kind of related. The first is an update of the Giza project, and for that we have some guests. We have Tim Geider and Phil Solomon from ICS, and Michael Lang from Provident Energy, who will give us an update.
You see,
Are they there?
Tim is unmuted.
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Are you able to turn your camera on, or do you need us to assist?
Sorry, I was not able to I was trying to turn my camera on, but it wouldn't let me. I didn't realize I could turn my audio on. So my audio is on, I believe.
Yes, your audio is on.
Thank you. And then was somebody else going to move the slide deck for us? Just so I'm sorry. we didn't get a
Could you
chance
give
to-
me the other 2 names of the other name of the person you wanted?
The other one would be Mike Lang.
Yep, Tim Geider, I'm here. I got video and audio, and then Phil Solomon and Mike Lang.
Hi, everybody.
There we go.
There you go.
Thank you. All right, there should be some slides as well.
Yes, Mr. Sanfran will be getting your slides up here shortly.
Oh, okay, excellent. All right, Mr. Sanfran. Well, I guess while we're waiting for that, just thank you for having us back. It's been quite some time since we were in front of the whole board. Again, I'm Phil Solomon. You have Tim Geider and Mike Lang. We're just going to give you a quick update. I know we only have about 15 minutes, and we were told less would be better. So we will certainly try to be within that time frame, and then leave time for question and answer. If we could move forward to just the overview slide. So yeah, not that one there. One back, just real quick. So here's what we're going to cover tonight. Just a quick history, a little background of energy efficiency in the district, the process to date, what we've done with the RFP process up till now, what we are calling the energy conservation measures that are recommended, and then a little bit about environmental benefits and the next steps. Next steps would be what's called the investment grade audit, so more due diligence. Can move on to the next slide here. So just a little background. We started this in February of 2020. You know, obviously that was not an ideal time, but then we took that next step in October, which led us to this request for proposal. That went out in January, and then Tim is going to have quite a bit of an update of what we've done since we've gotten that back in March. But if you take a step back, the district has been doing a great job in energy efficiency over the years. They worked with Mike Lang and Provident Energy since 2010, making sure you're getting the best price for commodities, and that saved you over $300,000 a year every year. And then you look at 2011, a project, a GISA project like this was done, where you did some energy conservation measures and really looked at solar. So that's where the solar project came from, the same kind of process. So the district's been very interested in renewables and energy efficiency for the better part of a decade. You can move to the next one. So there's some obvious benefits to this process, and there's some that are less obvious. So I just wanted to give you a high level. So the obvious benefits are, you're going to have energy and operational savings from this project, and they are going to help offset this capital project cost. But one of the less obvious is that you're using what's called the design build process versus the design bid build, the traditional process. And what that allows you to do is have the subject matter experts into the design. So you have the constructors working with the designers to come up with the best solution. And what that helps you do is solve complex technical problems like your control system. So your control systems are somewhat obsolete. They use lawn. I know it's a weird term, but that's really not used for building automation. So the best thing you can do is put all these great minds together, come up with this plan to migrate over to a newer technology. The nice thing about this process is then the contractor who's going to build it then guarantees the technical pieces of this as well as the financial pieces of this. And the way you pick that person or that company is not traditionally. It's not just the lowest first cost. It's life cycle cost, it's performance, it's their expertise, installation schedule. Cost is always a factor, obviously, but you're also looking at some other things to make sure they can get the job done. So it's a little different than your traditional process. Now, once you go through this next step, this investment grade audit, and if the board decides to move forward with a contract, another benefit of this is there's no change orders. So it's a guaranteed price. So there's none of this game that goes, well, you forgot this, so we charge you a bunch of extra. That doesn't happen here. And then finally, the last good thing is it's just a really efficient process to become an even better environmental steward. District already does a great job, but this just gets you to the next level. You can go into the next slide, please. So I'm sorry, I was going to hand this over to Tim, and he's going to walk through where we've been and where we're going.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So basically, last time we were here and presented to the board, it was November, and since then we've changed the color of some of these because we've been moving through this process. The directed RFP went out in January. We received the proposals, and I'll give you an update on some of the milestones. And on the next slide, we're here today to basically make a final ESCO selection or recommendation. And then, as Phil mentioned, proceed with that selected ESCO into the investment grade audit, where all of the engineering will be finalized. Additional measurements and testing will be done to solidify all the savings and costs. And then the outcome of that is basically a construction contract for consideration for the district. Next slide. So GIZA RFP process update. I'm not going to talk about all of these items. I know it's it's a lot here, but we've oh, we can. We've done a lot over the last we've done a lot over the last few months.
Sorry, Potnets is gone, but we'll go to half in Florida.
Mr. Sanfran, can you please address the open mic?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sound
I'm
good?
sorry for the interruption to your presentation.
That's okay. That's okay. So basically, collectively as a team, ICS, Provident, and your administration, we've really worked hard the last several months to bring this to you today. I'm just going to highlight the items that are in bold. 3 proposals were received back in March: CM3, JCI, and SiteLogic. There were virtual interviews held for each of the 3 ESCOs. And through that, we learned more about each ESCO, each proposal, and we generated lots of requests for information, basically shortlisted to 2 who we felt had the best project teams and pricing and savings, and that was CM3 and SiteLogic. From there, we worked through additional RFIs, had final presentations by CM3 and SiteLogic, in which it was our core team plus several board members who attended and were able to understand the differences. And then a final recommendation was made. The final recommendation is CM3, and really, 3 things kind of stuck out with them. They had a very impressive level of effort that they put in to the RFP process. They also had the strongest controls capabilities, which Phil kind of mentioned earlier on, which is a big need of the district, and also the best overall economics in terms of cost and savings. Next slide. So this snapshot is basically all of the items that were considered as part of the project. You'll see the 3rd column from the left, basically where these came from. So the RFP included high priority items, which were basically put together by our team and as well as the district administration. Lower priority items, and then we also asked the ESCOs to come back with other creative solutions or ideas from when they're doing their site visits. And you could see some of those at the bottom, in addition to another ECM that the district administration brought up for the middle school. Now you'll see all the way on the right, there's basically the green items, which is what we're recommending to proceed with at this point into the investment grade audit. And there are items that were basically not required for further evaluation, and typically the reasons that you'll see there were either the economics weren't favorable to the district, they weren't a priority at this point, or the district would complete them outside of the GIZA project. And then there are 2 for future consideration, that for solar PV and also the bipolar ionization, which are 2 just other ECMs that can be considered for evaluation in the future. Next slide. So just a brief overview, the project breakdown as basically the outcome of the RFP. You can see each of the ECMs, in addition to the, going from left to right, the installed cost of the ECMs, energy savings. So I'll start with just give you an idea from lighting. So the lighting LED upgrades on the interior side are just over $800,000 in cost. Energy savings of $46,000 per year. Operations and maintenance savings, basically material, avoided material cost every year of $15,000 for a total savings over 20 years, for $1.5 million. Going down the list, there's controls upgrades for the stadium, basically making it easier on your facilities group to schedule the lighting in accordance with events that occur at the stadium. Building envelope improvements, really weather stripping and sealing windows and doors for energy savings. And then 2 ECMs that are around controls. It's recommissioning of existing control systems, and it's also upgrading a good portion of your outdated controls, which Phil mentioned earlier. And then the next 3 items are really some pretty critical items that your district has to proceed with. The French Creek Elementary School chiller plant upgrades and North Coventry chiller plant upgrades both have chillers that are failing. And as part of this process, you can plan for replacement before you have a critical failure. Total project costs that were outlined here, just about $5 million. And again, all the way on the right, 6.4 million of savings over 20 years. I'll flip it back to Phil to go over the environmental benefits.
Great. Well, one of the things that, one of the benefits of doing a project like this is obviously environmental benefits. So just to tee it up, I did borrow this little graph from ourfuture.energy, and it's really the most sustainable ways to produce environmental benefits to the least. And it's kind of priority 1 through 5. So just to frame it, number 1 is behavior modification. That's like, turn the water off when you're brushing your teeth. That way, that water never had to be produced in the first place. That's very sustainable, didn't cost you anything. So that's kind of the first priority. This project that we're talking about is kind of the second priority. So it's energy efficiency through technology. That's like, replacing all the lighting in your district. And, now to produce that same amount of light, it's 30% less kilowatt hours. Well, again, now the grid doesn't have to produce that 30% of energy. Therefore, it's very energy efficient. Now, for things that you can't apply technology to, then you would look towards renewables. So now you will put more power on the grid to supply the things that are needed. You'll see that energy efficiency is actually ranked a little bit before renewables. Renewables grab headlines, but in some ways, energy efficiency produce environmental benefits in a better way or a more sustainable way than renewables. And then you have lower carbon technology and just business as usual. So getting to this project. So when you look at the project that we've looked at or proposed earlier, you have an electricity reduction of 473,000 kilowatt hours, 32,000 cubic feet of natural gas, 2,700 gallons of propane. And what that does is it produces a reduction in carbon dioxide. So it reduces your carbon footprint. When you look at how that does that, it's about 515 metric tons per year. Now it's a big number, but it's a hard number to grasp. So one of the things that the Department of Energy does is they put out this equivalency calculator. So what you do is you put that into a calculator and it puts it into more everyday terms. So that is the same amount of carbon that 62 average size houses produces per year, or equivalent to 112 vehicles. So it's quite a bit, a big environmental impact that this project is having, and you can see that in what it is equivalent to. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So having said all that, the next steps in this process, and there are a couple, would be to kind of accept the recommendation and move to the investment grade audit. Tim spoke about that. That's more due diligence. That's the way that you find what is the final piece of this project that will come in front of the board with all the final costs and savings, etc. So that's what we're asking tonight. Then we would go through the due diligence of doing the engineering investment grade audit and all those other bullets that you see. And when that is done, then a final contract would be brought for board consideration. And then obviously if that's approved, we would begin construction. So, with that, I think we're ready to answer questions. I know we went through a lot kind of in a short period of time, but we certainly are open to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. I know your companies and Jackie's team have done a lot of work. And I guess to summarize, you're asking us to spend around $5 million, but $2 million of that is really going to be spent anyway at some time in the future. So the project additional considerations are around $3 million. So with that, I'll see if the rest of the committee wants to have any questions answered.
I have one. We don't have a firm dollar value on the audit. Do we have that in front of us today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you should.
do.
It should be in your board package, I believe.
Right. I just thought you might want to say that for the public.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I
That was
could
a lead-on
read it
question.
out, but it's a lead off, yes.
So
Yeah.
I am
Please
kind of
enlighten
slow
the
in the
public.
lead. with that.
Yeah,
Tim?
it's $145,000 to complete the engineering and the investment grade audit. Yep.
And are there elements of that that will be applied to the actual cost going forward?
Yeah, that entire cost. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I was looking for that kind of answer from you. And just to kind of headline into what Dr. John said, our committee chair, some of those elements that will have to be done anyway are those chiller replacements that are on that list. And I just wanted to point that out for the public, since this is a public meeting, that those are items that will have to be dealt with anyway. So we're moving forward on it as a preemptive mode instead of waiting until they crash and burn.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Right.
Yep.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and,
And-
they crash and burn. We know that.
And I believe they're going to be going from natural gas to electricity, which will actually save us money, I think.
In the one building, yes.
Okay.
In
I do forget, which building is that?
North Coventry, there's
Coventry,
3 natural gas chillers
Okay,
that you have,
thank you.
and we're going to electric chillers, which is similar to what you've been doing in the other buildings.
Right, thank you. Mhm.
And I think I wanted to mention one more thing. I think it's important to note that when you look at all of the savings, we have some capital outlay, which most we would have to do anyway. The savings will be a direct reduction to the operational budget on an annual basis. So that's important to note.
Right, yeah, good point, Jackie, absolutely.
My quick question is, on slide number 9 of 12, you have a savings of over 20 years. I'm just wondering what the life expectancy of those items are. Like, are they going to be around in 20 years? Like, technology changes, you have maintenance costs, you have replacement costs. Are they considered as savings, or are you just saying this is what you save in energy only, but not any other factors like maintenance, replacement costs, break fix, or if they even last 20 years?
And
Yeah,
do you
so
want to take that, or would you like me to take it?
Yeah, the majority of the equipment here, according to ASHRAE, if you look at life expectancies, like the chillers, for instance, are usually 20 to 25 years. Controls is similar in that age. You still have regular maintenance. You still have to maintain these pieces of equipment. There's no doubt. But when we went through with your the district administration, we went and actually pulled actual money that you're spending today that you would be avoiding in the future when we came up with that O&M savings. So, for instance, the material on lighting, and how much are you spending on maintaining those gas-fired chillers? So that actually came from your budget over the last few years.
Okay, thank you. And my last comment, thank you for including some of the environmental factors and considering the environment. I really appreciate that. I imagine if there's any type of benefit we would get from grants given to the school for solar or for other energy costs, or tax breaks for energy costs, that we would include that in our normal budget. Jackie, is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, but I appreciate the look at how we are doing with the environment. Thank you.
And to piggyback on that, I believe that the new LEDs that we're going to be putting up in the ceilings, I think our current ones are not recyclable, but those will be. Is that what I recall?
Yeah, you still have a fair amount of fluorescent light bulbs in the district, and these interior LEDs, they're much more efficient. They provide better light for the learning environment, and I didn't mention, but there are also the utility rebates that are in the project through the Act 129, which you guys probably are familiar with. It's a $93,500, which mainly comes from lighting.
Yeah, and the what you have now would be recycled responsibly, because they do have to be disposed of properly, because they do have some environmental toxins in them.
And I think it's also important to note that the lighting product itself carries a 10-year warranty.
Yeah.
So getting back to your point about maintenance, it's nice to know that you won't have to buy materials for 10 years on the lighting side. So, and again, their life expectancy is upwards of over 20 years. I mean, they do it on an hourly basis, but with school hours and whatnot, it typically calculates to over 20 years. So it's a really nice touch.
Yeah,
Any other?
I just wanted to thank everybody for the very thoughtful work I think everybody's put into this, including our own maintenance people and Jackie. I just think it's a really good project going forward.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'll piggyback again and see if anybody else on the board would like to ask any questions. Okay.
Well,
So
thank you for having us.
Yes. We'll see you again, I'm sure.
Yes, you will.
Thanks everybody for your time.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
I think
that leads into item number 2.
Mhm.
Do you want to go over
Right,
it, Jack?
which is, sure, no problem, Dr. John. That
Thank
is
you.
actually the agreement with CM3 to do the investment grade audit. So that is the next step in the process. So we're having our solicitor review it now, and we'll be sure to, the final version that you'll see if this is moved forward for the board's consideration, we'll have all of our solicitors' comments cleared, and it'll be agreed upon by both parties.
Any questions about the agreement?
Yeah.
Do we have a motion then to move it on to the full board?
So moved.
Second that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you once again.
Yes.
And now
Thanks, Bill.
that ends my stay here, and now finance.
But you can't sign out. You're still
I know.
on. Yeah. Okay. All right. We are now at the Finance Committee. And first of all, we need to pass the minutes of the last meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to review them? And does anybody have any comments on those meeting minutes? No?
No comment. I'll make a motion to pass them.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you. We'll get on to the bulk of the evening for the Finance Committee. And as Chair of Finance, I had requested a very serious look at pushing for a tax increase below or at 1%. Upon review, we felt it would be a risky move going forward. All things considered, we have settled with an increase below 1.5%, exactly at 1.48%. And Mrs. Crumrine will lead us through those changes that this has occurred, and she has the opportunity to add anything else that she can and will. So thank you, Mrs. Crumrine.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Booth. Mr. Sanfran, if you could put the slide deck up for the budget. And while he is doing that, I'm going to, we have met 8 times in public to discuss the budget, and 3 times presented it in its entirety. So what I plan to do tonight, because I think most everyone is familiar with where we are with the budget at this point, I plan to go over the changes. But if anybody wants to back me up or has other questions, that's fine. So we are at May 3rd. Mr. Paul, the next slide, if you don't mind. So this is where we are now, and we're reviewing the final proposed budget, which would move, well, we would include it on the May board meeting agenda for the board to acknowledge receipt of, and then it would be approved at the June board meeting. We normally try to do this in April and May, but we did take a deeper dive, as Mrs. Booth said. Mr. Sanfran, if you could move to the slide, just keep rolling. to the significant budget drivers. The next one, please. Thank you. Some of the changes that we were able to make to the budget to reduce costs, we did meet with our benefit consultant, and most likely, because of COVID, our medical claims are down. So they're recommending that we hold our premiums steady, and so the district will not be contributing any more funds into our self-insurance fund, and neither will our employees. So we were able to reduce the employee benefit expenditure line increase by approximately $200,000. So that did help us because that was in the original budget. Our primary costs in our benefits are for the PSERS retirement system, and then also in expenditures, salaries, and contracted substitute services. We already went through all the other items on this slide. We haven't made any changes to our charter school tuition projections. We're hoping we come in better, but right now we are at about the budget level in commitments from parents to return. So hopefully we'll have more than that, but that's where we are today. Mr. Sanfran, if you could just keep skipping until I tell you, if you don't mind. We've been through all of these slides and there really aren't any changes to those slides. Same with the charter school tuition, same with the special education. No changes to that slide right there, if you wouldn't mind stopping there. So here's where we do have some changes to our budgeted line items. We were able to keep the tax increase below 1.5%. It's at 1.48% for next year. And that $2.296 million difference in local revenue is primarily made up of the tax increase and of about 1.2 million. And then the other million is earned income tax. We were able to revise our projections for earned income tax revenue. We're not seeing the hit that we thought we would, which is a good thing. A lot of people are working from home and still employed in the O&J Roberts School District anyway. You can go ahead, change, next slide, please. So for the responsibility cost centers, the one change that we talked about and we did make, you'll see there is a reduction in expenditures under administrative support cost centers, and that is the reduction of the transfer, the annual transfer that goes from the general fund to the capital fund. We are recommending that we waive that transfer this year, which is approximately $2.4 million. You'll see some increases in other district programs. We did increase expenditures and revenue equivalent to the ESSERS 3, and we'll have more updates regarding ESSERS 3 at future meetings, but we did include it in the budget. And then the next slide, please. So this is where we're taking a look into the outlying years. Mrs. Booth mentioned this a little bit earlier. When you change assumptions in one year, it does affect the outlying years. And one of the goals is to keep the tax rate increase as low as possible, definitely under the 2%. As you know, the index is up around 3% right now. So by utilizing savings from our 1920 budget, we allocated for the 2021 budget to balance with savings from 1920, if you recall. We won't need all of those savings for 2021, we'll need some. So we were able to push some of those additional savings out to years 22, 23, and 23, 24 in order to keep the average tax increase below 2%. And we'll adjust these projections every year, but at least you can see where the projections are for the current year and how we're proposing that we use them to mitigate some additional tax increases. You saw this slide before. These are changes in Chester County tax base and the district's tax base. And so this is our average now for our 10-year history. So the current year proposed tax increase is the lowest that we've had in a decade. So I think there was a lot of work and effort put into the budget. And I want to thank everybody for their input this year. And happy to open it up to questions.
Anybody else in the committee first? I know we've been through this a few times, but in case you missed any of the elements, are there any deeper questions you'd like to ask Mrs. Crumrine?
I feel it was all pretty straightforward and well explained, and I really appreciate all the work that went into it.
Thank you.
All right. How about the rest of the board?
I have a quick one that I think you've told us before, Jackie, so I'm very sorry that I forget the answer, but why are
Okay.
you recommending that we don't transfer from between budgets this year?
Because it would be an additional $2.3 million and it would have a significant tax impact.
Right.
So we would be well above, we'd be closer to the 3% if we included that in the budget this year. So we're trying to hold off on that transfer until the revenues catch up, the assessed values increase so that we can incorporate all of that back into the budget when the revenues catch up.
Okay, thank you.
That makes sense in future years. You're welcome.
I just had a quick question about what you said about the charter school numbers.
Mhm.
So which charter school numbers are we using right now? Are we still using that number that we still have, what was it, like 40 some kids that we still expected to stay? Is that what you were using? And can you still expect we might be able to reduce that, or are you settled on that?
No, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we can reduce that further. What we would likely do is any future savings that we get above and beyond what are budgeted would most likely be then reallocated, and we would bring this back to the board to help fund the cyber school. So I don't think that the costs are going to go away. We're just hopeful that we can not send them out to charter schools. So we're conservative in our budget.
Yeah, but hopefully our cyber option would not be quite as expensive.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the goal.
Okay. And then this is an old question, but it went by so fast I didn't see it on the slide. Those savings that we had in 1920 that you're pushing ahead, what was that total number of savings that?
The total number was about $2.45 million. So we're allocating about 1.3 million to the current year, 2021, because we're still not balanced. And then the remainder to 22, 23, and 23, 24, as far as in the budget.
Okay, great, thanks.
Sure.
I just want to make a comment. I'm really happy with the committee's direction to try to not go to the maximum for tax increases every year. I know we've talked about how we can't, keep it at a flat rate, but I think, trying whatever we can to limit how much we increase is always good, especially because we have no idea what the economy is going to look like in the next couple of years with everything. So I'm happy with that direction you guys are taking.
I like to especially to thank again Jackie and Ms. Booth, who really championed the lower tax rate.
Well, thank you. I will make my little spiel. I make it every year. We fully understand the impact that our tax increases affects all of our residents. And we do have a lot of residents living on fixed incomes and not very high incomes as well. So we're always very cognizant of how we do impact our community. And I thank Mrs. Crumrine for doing the heavy lifting and my interjection there at the kind of the last minute when we were kind of set and wanted to take a further look. But again, yes, thank everybody. And please, I want our constituents to know that their fiscal health is always in our minds. We don't just spend to spend money. We consistently look at any way that we can lower cost, but also retain the quality of education that we provide our students. So thank you. And the public, we will have an opportunity at the end of this meeting if you do have questions going forward. But unless the board has any other questions, I think we can move on. All right.
All right.
I think we can go right ahead.
Thank you, Mrs. Booth. So this presentation is for the entire board, and I know some of you have your cameras off because that was a committee presentation. So this presentation and the next are for the entire school board. So Mr. Sanfran, thanks for giving me the ability to share my screen. right. So May is the time when we update the school board on our district goals. The district goals are set at the beginning of the school year, and then they're approved by the school board. And these are the goals by which both the superintendent and the assistant superintendent are evaluated. The district has these broad categories for developing goals: student growth and achievement, safe and caring environment, fiscal responsibility, efficient and effective operations, and communications and community relations. I will be showing the board that we have either completed the goal is progressing, or we have placed the goal on hold here tonight. I think that the board, you will see that tonight that as I'm going through our goals that you approved back in the fall, that I am certain that by the end of the presentation, you will agree that we have been laser focused on these goals this year, because you have heard this over and over again throughout the course of our committee meetings and the course of the school board meetings. So the very first goals are associated with student growth and achievement. And because these goals have already been presented before, I'm just going to be reporting out on the outcomes of the goals. So the very first action step was to monitor the success of students in the blended and cyber environment and make necessary curriculum adjustments. I'm not sure that we have talked about much else this year during our meetings than the pandemic. And so throughout the year, we have updated the board on during our curriculum committee meetings on the progress of this goal, as well as the development and implementation of a common structure of Google Classroom through K-8 and the Canvas for our high school students. We've talked about the extensive professional development that has been provided to our teachers as it relates to virtual and blended learning. The board has been updated on student progress and will receive one final update at the end of the school year. We are pleased to have been able to return to 5 days in person learning for our elementary school students, 4.5 days at our middle school, and 4 days for high school, the moment transition rates dropped for 3 consecutive weeks. We are also proud that we have been able to honor our commitment to offer parents a virtual learning environment for the entire school year. Also, under student growth and achievement, we had a second action step, which was to determine the feasibility of a standalone cyber academy, which is regionally competitive. And so this evening, the board, we're going to mark this complete a couple of weeks early because the board still has to approve this. But tonight, the board did accept our recommendation and approved it to move on for the May 17th board meeting. This goal this will challenge the district for the future, because fortunately right now we have ESSER's 3 funds that we'll be using to finance the Cyber Academy for the next year. But the board is going to be challenged in the future to work this into the budget if it's going to continue in years to come. The third action step is to investigate secondary programs for middle level learners and to revise the secondary elective offerings. And so this goal is progressing. And so I have it as progressing because our middle school administration reviewed high performing middle schools and the programmings that they offer. However, it's just not possible to visit any of those schools this year with a team of our teachers. The middle school administration was successful in implementing several interventions to assist our current students, as well as a summer program to include both academic work and a social emotional well-being component is planned. Students are being identified and will be invited to our summer school program. The board heard about that at one of our previous meetings. The middle school also solidified a lab program for ELA this year, ELA and mathematics this past year, and has assessed how to better identify students for those classes. Once the middle school can have all students in person for a full year, then the administration will be better positioned to assess the effectiveness of both the changes to these interventions and the school schedule. With regards to the elective offerings, this was completed as planned, and the curriculum department initiated a progress review of new elective courses for all subjects and completed the review and revise of the K-12 language arts curriculum, business education, assessments and new e-portfolio courses, and the PE elective courses, and updated resources in the LibGuide. Next year, they will look at family consumer science. One of our key teachers was on leave this year, and so that work will carry over to next year. It's important to remind the board and anybody that's watching that our goals are written for 1 to 2 years. All of this work is not expected to be done in 1 year, and so that's the reason why they're labeled as progressing. Safe and caring environment is another one of our broad categories. This year, we really changed this category out of necessity. Typically, this deals heavily with school safety, but we've made such great progress in this area that this year we developed our goals to focus on the pandemic. So the first goal was to create a dynamic health and safety plan, which will serve as the local guidelines for all instructional and non-instructional school reopening activities that will be tailored to the unique needs of each school, created in consultation with local health agencies and incorporate enough flexibility. I feel like this has been my life every day of this pandemic. And so the board most months received an update on the plan, and those updates were driven by the Chester County Health Department guidelines and state mandates that have come along. And so I have to say that at this point in time, we anticipate that PDE will require schools to have a health and safety plan to remain in place at least through the end of the summer. We have not received any direction for the next school year at this point. The second goal was to educate students using theory-driven and evidence-based programs that speak to stop violence, discrimination, harassment before it happens, to change the climate and culture through targeted intervention. And so, board members, I'm going to pause my PowerPoint, and I'm going to go to the other document that is part of your executive content. I say that, I have to actually be able to see it to get to it. There it is, okay. Not the equity action plan, even though we are still working through that. Let me stop this share and let me go to a new share because it's in a different format. Still wants to keep sharing that. So let me go to this one, and that's not the one I wanted to share. I thought this might happen to me tonight because it's not allowing me to share a window with you. Nope. Okay. I'm going to share not the greatest format for this document, but I'm going to share the Google version of this with you. So bear with me here for a second. All right, let's try this time. I'm going to share with you our strategic plan for addressing concerns raised by the 2020 independent report, because that's where the bulk of this goal is focused on here. And so you have this, board members, in your executive content. All right, here we go. This was presented before, so I am going to skip down to the part of the actual action steps. You'll remember that this comes from the third-party investigation that was conducted by Kelly Hodge. These are her specific recommendations. And so I'm going to give you an update on this because this is the bulk of the goal, this aspect of this goal. So the first part talked about the reporting and the documentation. And so you'll notice that this section is complete because it focused on creating a system that would capture how students could verbally report, as well as how they could electronically report discrimination, harassment, and violation. We were to review our methods for our Title IX, and I know the board is well aware of that. We reviewed the personal notes that are kept in offices. Our HR department did that. And we also reviewed employee files. So that work has all been done. And some of it is, there are other pieces to this particular work that was completed. The next part talks about identify barriers to reporting and the different ways to promptly dismantle them. And so involving students in identifying ways to dismantle actual or perceived reporting barriers. I have it as ongoing. We don't stop our conversations with students. This isn't something that you can just mark as complete. And so our principals got the input from our students to get us started this year. And so that will be, that work will continue through the remainder of this year and the years to come. To evaluate the current curriculum, there's two parts to this goal. And so this part was to review where do we address anti-discrimination, anti-harassment within our community. And then the next part really has to do with evaluating our current curriculum. And as the board knows, we have a curriculum cycle that we're working on. And so as we work through our cycle of curriculum each year, we'll be looking through it with an equity lens. And so you heard me talk about this year, we did elementary ELA and we did some of the PE electives. So as we go through that curriculum cycle, we will continue to evaluate. Again, not something I think that you just check off as complete, because I think that as the needs of our students and society changes, we'll be looking at this curriculum over and over again through an equity lens. The next part was to improve methods of reporting, and we did this very promptly. So now our the way to report issues of harassment, misconduct, discrimination, any kinds of threats, bullying. There is now, the students have the ability to do this from the website of each of our schools. It is on there, and then it's advertised through the schools, how to do it. And then the students were specifically trained in how to go to the website to make the report. They also were trained in how to make a verbal report and who are the people that you should report to in addition to your parents. We stress that starting in kindergarten, that you report to your parents and to somebody at school. So those things have all been completed. We evaluated our current available resources for addressing sexual harassment, such as dating violence and stalking. That is primarily a high school topic, and so they reviewed that. Anytime that we have a student that is a victim of a gender-based harassment, we have put in place a letter of support along with other support strategies. And so that has been put in place. But again, that's going to be ongoing. That's not something you check off as complete. We've put a process in place for that. As as the board knows and community knows, I have sent out multiple statements denouncing anti-sexism and anti-racism, and they are not often favorably received by members of our community, and thus the need to be doing this very important work of equity. We established school-based teams to look at the how reports are being made with regards to inappropriate conduct or harassing behavior. That was how we were able to develop the reporting systems. And so we've educated the students and staff on the discriminating policies and procedures and promoting awareness. Mr. Sanfran, we have somebody that doesn't have their mic here. And how to prevent and respond to this. And so this has been an ongoing with our staff this year. We reviewed our mandated reporter training, as well as the characteristics of grooming behavior that they would be looking for along the way. Extensive Title IX training, because there was a lot of change to the law this year, and what how folks are expected to respond. We've had boundary training, as well as how do you report these. So I see it as ongoing. This training has always never just been a once and done training. It's been ongoing. This year we were fortunate to be afforded time to do professional development with our faculties on the asynchronous Wednesdays. So we covered a lot of ground this year. This next category has to do with best evidence practices and data-driven solutions. The board is aware we've had a workshop that had to do with the data surrounding discrimination and hazing and bullying and discipline. We looked at those together. The People Services reviewed the PACE survey. Not much has changed in that survey, and we had already had programs in place to address that. That survey is also posted on our website. We will be continuing to collect the data, and those annual surveys will go out in May as they had in the past. As the board is aware, there was a recommendation to look for a new tool for data assessment, and I have that marked as in progress. The budget really couldn't bear that this year, with us being asked to have reduced the amount of tax increase. And so we really budget couldn't bear that. So I put that in progress for something that the board and the next superintendent can come back to. Hiring was another category that was on this list. And so identify and hire skilled and trained personnel and/or external resources to address the subject areas of diversity, equity, inclusion, sexual harassment, trauma, social and emotional development, and cultural competencies. And so we have a mix of training that we do in-house, and we've partnered with individuals from outside our organization as well. There was a recommendation for the district to hire a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist. I have this as being on hold for the district, for the board to consider for next year. Again, the budget could not bear adding another position to the budget and still remain within a 1.5 tax increase. Included in here is to create a hiring pipeline to recruit, hire, and retain diversity faculty. Our HR director, Daniel Hay, has been working on this throughout the school year. And some of you that are on the call probably have seen that we have several faculty this year that are minorities. So that's thanks to her hard work and working with ESS to bring those individuals to our school districts. And so those came to us in the form of substitute teachers who have worked for us this year. And so then they will be considered for positions for next year, in addition to relationships that she has developed with local universities for us to be attracting a diverse graduate. This last part of the, no, I'm wrong. It's not the last part. This has to do with the education and communications. The first one was involving educating the community on the role of the school police officer. I have this postponed since we have hired a new chief of police. And once he's here full time, I think this will be a good time to talk about that. After all, our students weren't in person for the majority of the year, and so it didn't really make sense to be educating parents on that. We're recommended to develop a partnership with the Chester County DA, and we have that thankfully, and we communicate as needed with them. It was recommended that we educate the school community on what can be shared with parents without violating students' rights. And so principals have been doing that throughout the year and will continue. I don't ever see us checking this box because I don't think it's possible to communicate one piece of information to everybody in a time when people are so overwhelmed. Faculty, parents, and students should be provided access to information and or instruction on gender identity and sexual orientation, being an ally, and being an upstander, and student-led alliance groups. And so we have done a variety of trainings over the school year. Being an upstander is part of our bully prevention program. So our students all received a refresher in the Olveus bullying prevention program and what it means to be an upstander. Our faculty has received extensive training this year on sexual orientation, and our high school students also provided training for our high school teachers on gender issues that are facing our students and how they feel in our students. So I have this as ongoing because there's more work to be done in this particular area. This year, much of our focus was with our faculty. We did provide some parent sessions. One was with students of stewards of children being the primary one that we have focused on this year. We appreciate all of the work that the AID committee has done with bringing programming to parents in our community. The second area has to do with prevention and sexual harassment and racism. This work has been taken over at a building level and is going to be postponed at the high school until we get our new principal, who will then be able to next year be able to do more focused work on that. We continued the programming that we already had in place with our students through their health and PE classes. And so he will pick up this work next year. Expanding our stakeholders communication, that's always ongoing. Identify the external and invite external resources, which we have been doing this year. We did a lot of work with the crime victims. We also worked with the Race Institute, and we started working with a new consulting group called Beacon that we will continue our work, our focus on equity and inclusion next year. That leads us into the training that has been going on for our staff. Has been ongoing, as I mentioned earlier, very, very extensive training. Probably the best part of the pandemic was that we had time to provide all of this training, not just on equity issues, but also on mental health as well. We have reviewed, just for everybody's information, we have completed the review of all employee records to verify that they do have all the required clearances on file. And the same way with our volunteers, even though we're not currently using volunteers, those records were reviewed as well. We did retrain all of the district administrators on our dual notification process for reporting issues on employees, as well as Title IX. A lot of time is spent on that this year. Testing and evaluation. We do monitor our faculty, our employee, I shouldn't say faculty, our employee emails. That's always been in place, and so we continue to do that. We have mechanisms in place. We put mechanisms in place to gather feedback on existing student support programs and resources to determine if they're being faculty. It's always important to be reflective. The last category here is discipline. And so each of our schools developed a task force, whatever they had various names for them to look at the data, to look at their discipline data and the nature of the offenses, who was being disciplined, and to disaggregate that data to see if we are being disproportionate. And then retrain our faculty and staff on policies implementing bias and uniformity in the application of these consequences. And so that's ongoing. I just don't ever see that box as being checked off, because every year you need to review this. You always have new staff that are coming in. The final part of this was just the committees, and this has to do with the Legislative and Policy Committee and the work that they are doing with the reviewing of the policies. This will be, after tonight's presentation, this will be uploaded to our website, and we will, along with the presentation on the goals. So let's go back and finish up reviewing the goals here tonight. So I'll share my screen again. There it is. All right, and so this is where we left off on that goal. And so this goal is marked as progressing because there are some areas that it will take 2 years in order to be able to achieve all of that. There was a third part to this goal, which is to establish equity as the foundation that frames every district decision and intentionally includes the voice of all in order to provide opportunity for our students to learn. And so the board developed an equity action plan in partnership with PSBA. Not going to go to that this evening. We are at the point of now developing the policy. The Legislative and Policy Committee are working with Dr. Marchini to develop that. Dr. Marchini has reported out multiple times throughout the year during the pupil services meetings on the progress that the building's race equity projects have made. And we continue to partner with Ellie Michael from the Race Institute and Beacon Learning to guide our anti-racism work. The fourth safe and caring environment is to integrate into all classrooms self-awareness and self-management skills, so all learners establish and maintain positive relationships and responsible behavior in personal, school, and community contexts. So this is the work that we've been doing around social emotional learning. As the board knows, we have partnered with the SEL Connection of Tom Stecker and Associates. And so we have a team of teachers that are part of the SEL Connection. And so we have what's called a coaching cohort that each of the schools has teachers that are involved in that. Includes our academic coaches, our ISTs, and the administrator. We have worked on identifying the competencies and building a classroom community across all of our schools. One of the beautiful things is that each of our schools has its own unique culture about it. This SEL work is part of that. It also focuses on the non-academic content that's so critical to our students being successful in school. And so then our core group of teachers will finish their work with Tom Stecker and Associates in June, and then they will be finalizing their SEL plan for each of their schools. So moving on to the fiscal responsibility, and gosh, I have so many windows here, I can't hardly see what's going on, so let me move that over there. The first step was to develop a process to apply for and report on the status of any available COVID-related grants and assistance to the district and to assist with reducing the net operating costs. And so we've talked about this most meetings. I think we've developed an internal tracking system and reporting for recording and reporting the systems for all of the COVID-related grant expenditures, and developed a team of staff members who meet regularly to ensure that the grant opportunities are maximized. Regular updates are posted to the finance page of the district's website, and we talk about it frequently at all of our meetings this year. So as the board knows, our total COVID-19 grants as of April 23rd was $5,422,000, which includes the ESSER 3 funds of $2.8 million, and currently budgeted for the 21-22 and the 22-23. So that $2.8 million we will be able to utilize over the next 2 years for remediation and to be able to continue the Cyber Academy. In addition, as we continue to look for grant opportunities, we are currently, one example of this is that there's a federal COVID grant available through the FCC that our technology department is in the process of pursuing. So we have our eyes open for that. The other part of this goal was we developed a district-wide inventory management system for the COVID PPE supplies. And so that was set up and is managed by our facilities department. All building requisition supplies go through this system, and we have had ample supply of PPE through this school year. Another piece that is here was to develop the 2021 general fund budget, and so that's what you heard about here this evening. And so I've marked that complete in anticipation that the school board will be accepting the recommendation that you heard tonight. So we won't need to spend any more time on this. We've spent a lot of time here tonight talking about that budget. The last part of this was to evaluate future investment needs to improve our virtual learning options. Financial projections were provided to the board in February, which is being updated as cyber options are being solidified for the next school year. To date, long-term financial impacts have not been included in future budget forecasts. This will require ongoing discussion with the board and will be based upon the level of desire for continued cyber instruction options for our families. We do know that we have enough interest in continuing our cyber programming for the next school year. The challenge is for the parents that are opting for that to be satisfied. Because as you heard Dr. Soder tell us earlier, that it's going to look different than it does this year. We already know that we do have 15 of the students that we've lost to a cyber charter will be coming back to us next year, but there's no way for us to predict if more students will leave us. A little bit on the effective and efficient operations, recommend a long-term solution for district service center, prioritizing feasibility, green initiatives, such as repurposing, reusing the existing school district facilities and incorporating energy savings. And so in November, during the Buildings and Grounds Committee, we discussed a proposed district-wide service center at the former East Coventry Elementary building. The district lease for the current warehouse will expire in August of 2022. We have received all of the necessary final approvals from the East Coventry Board of Supervisors, and at the April school board meeting, architectural services were approved. So we are moving into the design phase for this project. This next goal was, if we weren't able to, if East Coventry was not feasible, then we had to have another plan. So we can easily mark this one complete because we were able to repurpose the East Coventry building. Another a step here, another goal under effective and efficient operations was to develop a workforce plan that meets current prioritized objectives of the district. And so I have this on hold. This goal is placed on hold because I'm certain that everyone will agree that this past year was not a good year to analyze our workforce and projecting for the future. So instead, our HR department focused on managing employees' leaves due to COVID, as well as the ongoing hiring substitute teachers. It's kept them quite busy, and we were very successful this year compared to other districts. Community and community relations. The first goal had to do with the communication of the pandemic health and safety plan. This has been communicated. I'm sure people are tired of hearing from me. They'd like to hear some different news from me that doesn't have to do with the health department guidelines or a mandate. So we'll continue to communicate out about the health and safety plan as that guidance changes. The refresh of the district website was one of the goals, and so that is complete, and we've received favorable feedback from that as well. Another goal under this particular area has to do with assuring pertinent information associated with the progress on meeting the district's goals is communicated using all appropriate channels, and that stakeholders have opportunities to provide feedback. And so we regularly communicate out. It's not always just me, it's building principals that are communicating out about the work of the district. And so that work I have is progressing. We're really never done communicating out about the district. And then finally, just a couple of next steps that I identified is that I suggest that the district goals be shared with the new superintendent, since they were written to exceed my time as superintendent. I would suggest that you add a separate goal for equity, that you take that away from the safe and caring environment and give it its own separate goal to show your commitment to equity in our school district. And then my final recommendation would be that after your new superintendent arrives, that you then would meet and review and revise the district goals based on the outcomes for this school year. So I'll stop sharing and answer any questions that our school board has about our district's goals.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
They're mostly related to the independent review recommendations. And if you don't have the answers off the top of your head, let me know.
All right.
How I should get the information I'm looking for. Sorry, allergies. Under reporting and documentation, the fourth bullet talks about looking at employees' files and identifying any concerns that need to be addressed. And it's marked as complete. Are there any outcomes to that, even just broad statements you can share with us around the results of that exercise?
And so Mrs. Hay completed that with the building principals, because as anybody that supervises employees is aware, is that when you have to discipline an employee, you keep records of that. Well, those records are somewhat meaningless if they're not in the HR file. And so it was going through the records that each principal had and making sure that any documentation that was formal, formal disciplinary action in the form of a warning or a plan of improvement, and making sure that that was in the HR files, because after all, we know that principles change. And so those files could cease to exist because they were that individual principal's files. And so we have done that, and then we've put in systems for assuring that the records are coming to the HR file the first time and not as an afterthought.
Sorry, I might not have been clear. That's the bullet above the one I'm talking about. The one I'm talking about is that if there's anything that was identified, concerns that need to be addressed. I'm thinking trends. We keep talking about, like, we didn't have visibility to trends in the past because of the disparate nature of how things were addressed or kept. And I'm wondering if it brought anything to light that needed to be addressed. Of course, you can't share with us what those might be, but did it prove fruitful? Was there anything there that was?
No, it did not provide fruitful. What was more fruitful was the building level file.
Okay. And then the establish a school-based task force to assess reported complaints of inappropriate conduct or harassing behavior. What does that look like? What are the task force? What does?
And so it was really the building at the building level, looking to see how are these things being addressed, working with, depends, each building is different. Some have assistant principals, some have head teachers, and then working with their building union reps about how are these situations addressed, and then making.
Each building has built its own group of people that are now in charge of ongoing assessment of this.
No, they've assessed it once, and they put in a procedure. If there wasn't one in place, they've articulated the procedure, and now we're going on. It's only the principal has the ability to have access to this information.
Right. Okay.
Not any other employees in the building.
Okay, 2 more questions. I'm done. I'm going fast. This is under best evidence practices and data-driven solutions. Gather all existing historical data on past reports involving harassment, discrimination, hazing, bullying, identify what trends or patterns are demonstrated based on the data. I would love to see the outcomes of that review. I know it's in progress, but once that's complete and we have trends and patterns identified, would you be able to share that with the board?
Sure.
Thank you. And then finally, in hiring, it says we have a plan for hiring. Plan should be developed in consultation with interested faculty members and/or external search firms specialized in diverse hiring practices. Says that's complete. Can at least the personnel committee get a copy of that or understand what that plan is?
I'm sure that Mrs. Hay would be happy to talk to you if she's on the call right now. She can chime in. She might not be on the call right now, but
I will shut up and let others ask questions.
Okay. She will be happy to talk to you more about that. She can even put it in her board line this week. Other questions?
I do have one question, and it refers to the comment about formal disciplinary actions with recording behaviors by employees. Will complaints against, even though they might be unfounded, will they be kept in those records that it occurred? I mean, it could be listed as unfounded or whatever, but to me, that could possibly show a pattern that comes forward later. So I'm just a little concerned as to how formal it has to be for anything to be in anyone's file. Did I make sense?
You did.
Okay,
So that's why the principal keeps that file.
okay,
Because they're documenting incidents that occur
okay.
over
All right.
time. And so one incident, a parent complains that about their child's teacher does not warrant the discipline of a teacher if, depending on what the incident is. Now, obviously, if it's egregious, that we're not talking about that. You're talking about a pattern of behavior of low level discipline behavior, so that when a principal is seeing that that's a repeated behavior, then they take action and they document, that they had a phone call here, they observed this here, they spoke to the person there, and so then they put that into a formal documentation.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a general request on this is, I know we've seen pieces of information here and there on updates, but more of some metrics to follow up on these goals where we, like the PACE survey, what it told us, and then what actions we did with it. If we could just kind of more explicitly spell out, what the data was, and then what specific actions we took, versus just the complete or in progress. That would be helpful, I think, if we could put that on board line maybe. And, kind of similar to that, and Danielle will be looking forward to, the diversity hiring plan that you guys put together. I definitely would like to see that circulated to personnel committee. We can kind of go over that. But again, I think just as a general rule, if we could get some update on just the actual metrics and data that drives this, and then what actions we're taking out of this, I think that'd be helpful for kind of understanding this update a little better. Thanks.
Any other questions? All right. Let's move on to our final agenda item of the night. And that is the health and safety plan that's on the agenda. Mrs. Prophet, you asked that this be added to the agenda for discussion tonight.
Yeah, so I think particularly it was in regards to discussion around quarantine guidance, because Chester County Health Department had released additional guidance if 14 days was not feasible. We've had some questions, so I think understanding what administration's recommendation is for this and where we go from here.
Okay. I believe joining us this evening is our head nurse, Deb Weber, that all of you met. And so Deb, if you unmute and turn on your camera, you'll be able to join the conversation. And so the board has heard me say now several times that my recommendation is that as long as we remain in this very high range of transmission, that we continue to quarantine for the 14-day period. And so Deb, you want to add on to that?
Well, I think, Susan, in addition to that consideration being in the very high range, I think the nursing department would want to as well extend the 14-day quarantine when we're still in the high range as well, and consider the alternate quarantine periods when we do reach the low and moderate range, which would be less than 50. We have shown that we have had positive quarantined individuals past the 7-day quarantine and past the 10-day quarantine. And had we let them come back to school early and they would have developed symptoms and test positive, you would have additionally taken out all their close contacts. And I think we're still trying to mitigate the spread in our schools to the greatest degree possible. And I think maintaining a conservative approach is still indicated while we're at the county transmission levels that we are.
I believe that some of our principals are also on tonight. And so Ed Smith, if you're on, and Bill Richardson, if you're on, if you would turn on your camera and microphone, and maybe Mr. Stoltz, who's at the middle school, and could you give us your perspective on quarantining and your thoughts behind maintaining the 14 days? Mr. Richardson, I know that you live and breathe contact tracing at the high school. That's where the majority of our students are quarantined. And so can you just talk about your thinking?
Sure. Well, what Deb just reiterated is one of my points. You just don't know when someone could test positive and still be transmitting it, whether it's, from day 7 to day 14. And so you're taking a risk when you lower that that quarantine date and have somebody come back if they were positive. And we've had about 45 to 50 tracing events at the high school this year. Some of those events didn't end up quarantining anyone. Some of them quarantined up to 15 or 16 students. In addition to that, we've had over 5 team quarantines where it wasn't a contact in the school, but it was a team-based contact where members of a sports team had to quarantine. And so being able to take those students out, number one, the ones that are testing positive or probable, but also ones that are very close contacts, probably prevents you from many, many more students missing that 2 weeks of school, because you leave them in or you bring them back within that window where they then develop symptoms and become positive. And now you've got another group of students, anywhere from 0 to 15 students that you're taking out. So I think we've avoided quarantining a lot of students by being conservative about the way we quarantine. And I think if we continue to do that, we can keep those numbers down. You talked about incidence rates. We've had a rate of about 15 per month from September through February of positive cases in the school, and that jumped from March and April up to more than doubled to about 32 per month. So again, erring on the side of caution with that 14-day quarantine probably kept our numbers way down.
Mr. Smith, did you have thoughts?
I think what Deb has outlined hits the mark. I think everybody would want kids in school as soon as possible. However, just to kind of highlight what Deb said, over the last 2 weeks, we've had 2 positives that were within that 10 to 14 day window, where if they had been in school, those 2 positives could have, we would have had to quarantine at least 14 to 16 more students on top of already 18 to 20. And so it just amplifies that ripple effect. There's 20 some days of school left. I don't see why a change at this point, when there's so many negatives associated with it, would be worth the effort. I think at this point we should stay the course. My recommendation, it has proven to keep more kids in school, less kids out of school, and plus it stops the mitigation within the buildings. That's my thoughts.
Corbin, did you have anything else to add? Jan?
29 days to be exact, Mr. Smith. You said 20 some days, just wanted to clarify. No, I echo what Bill and Ed, and certainly what Deb and her colleagues stated as well. We've seen a bit of an uptick of late with identified positive cases, and some of that has to do with the fact that our nurses are now able to administer some testing in school and get results immediately. So that's a good thing too. We're able to identify those students immediately and get them sequestered and home, and then contact trace right away before a student spends their entire day in school and comes in contact with whatever number of other students. So I kind of look at this from the standpoint of, don't fix what's not broken for us right now. I think when we look at those who are testing positive in our buildings, to the best of my knowledge, very little of that district-wide, if any, is coming from contact in school, student to student in school, linked transmission, if you will. Most of what we're seeing there is happening outside of school, understandably. Some of the controls that we have in place within our buildings isn't always there outside of school, depending on the activities they're partaking in. So I think what we're doing is working. I think we are protecting the students who are in school. There is certainly a piece of me that understands, especially those students that are so involved in other activities at school, spring sports, et cetera, who when they're quarantined for 14 days, they're also quarantined from that. And I certainly recognize the value of that those opportunities to participate provide for our students. It's big for their mental health. But at the same time, we have to kind of do what's best, unfortunately, for the masses, even if it means that one student may not be able to participate in those activities for a couple weeks. So I understand all sides. I do believe that what we are doing in the buildings is working, and would recommend we stay the course.
Other questions and thoughts from other board members?
Yes, I have a couple questions. So I'm wondering, when you're talking about children that were within that 10 to 14 days, are you saying that those children have been exposed to someone at school? So that's a linked transmission then? Is that what you're saying?
Let me clarify. What happened was you have outside event, whether it's a sporting event such as hockey or whatever the event was, and we quarantined and contact traced and quarantined. And then if we would have brought them back after 7, test on 5, symptom free, bring them back on 7, that 10 to 14 days, 2 of those students that we quarantined ended up being positive. And then I would have had to contact trace those 2 separate cases as well. We have had 1 link transmission in the building.
Okay, so when you're talking about a hockey, you're talking about, it's not even a school related activity. It's just like some outside thing.
But it doesn't matter. There's a positive case, and I still have to contact trace 48 hours prior to that positive case, which that's where, when I'm making those calls at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. Yeah, it's from an event that took place on a Friday that's in my building. So 48 hours to the positive case, we have to contact trace those.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wasn't understanding that. So the hockey event is a school event, though. You're not talking about like something that's a community.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking. It doesn't matter. The event doesn't matter. A positive case is a positive case. I'm just saying when I get the phone call,
that's fine. I just was wondering because I didn't know whether or not you were hearing about every case that might be happening, in children that might be traveling, who knows where, to some volleyball tournament or something, like whether you're hearing about that type of stuff.
Oh, we do. That's a big
We are.
is that we
was
get
my
that.
question.
And so they have to report to the school that they're positive, and that drives then the contact tracing.
Okay, I see.
The point being that if we reduced quarantine to 7 days, then that would have been an additional 15 to 30 more kids quarantined for another 7 days because we brought them back after 7, they tested positive, and they had interaction with a bunch of other kids.
Yeah, I get it now. Thank you. Another question I just had is, at this point, if we have a case in a classroom, what is considered a close contact that you would quarantine? Because I know obviously we used to have fewer children in there, and now we have more. So how are you judging who's a close contact in that instance?
So we're still required to contact trace all students that were within 6 feet. So as we know, we have students that are seated next to each other, particularly at the elementary school, that are 3 feet from students. So that's what they have not changed that requirement for contact tracing.
Okay, so it's within 6 feet. Okay. And then finally, my last question is just these elementary school students, obviously they don't have a cyber option now. So for them to be missing 2 weeks of school, I'm just wondering what we're doing to make sure that they're keeping up with their work. What types of strategies are we using for them if they're out?
Dr. Lloyd, if I may, every principal has worked hard with the teachers to either provide synchronous instruction. And if some of our cases are out 24 days, or if there's extenuating circumstances based on the family situation, we're able to move them over into a cyber teacher. So if Dr. Lloyd's one of my cyber teachers at 3rd grade, little Ed's out for 24 days, I will take Ed and move him over to Dr. Lloyd's cyber class so that we maintain instruction.
Okay, thanks.
Other thoughts or questions?
Just a quick clarification on this 7 to 10 day to 14-day window. Are we saying that some of these kids are tested and they test negative after 5 days or 7 days, and then they subsequently become and are positive, develop the symptoms? Or is this nothing to do with testing? The 14 days or the quarantine is irregardless of any testing?
Mrs. Weber, were you going to jump in?
Right. The 14-day quarantine is irregardless of testing. Testing is advised after 7 days from the exposure. Some people do test, some people don't. Specifically, though, what we're looking for are symptoms to develop within that 14-day window, which makes them probable. And of course, it's always advised that they're tested if they become probable. Does that help?
But if they test, let's say 7 days and I test negative, it's still a quarantine situation.
Yes, currently we are following the 14-day full quarantine.
And I guess to kind of follow up on that, I understand that, people develop symptoms within the first 14 days. And I do remember very early in the pandemic, I think the first person in our region who brought COVID to our area got symptoms on the 13th day after exposure. So I remember that standing out very strongly in my head. So when I started to see the reduced recommendations of testing after 5 days, return if symptom free after 7 days, my assumption then was that the tests have gotten good enough that you can tell after 5 or 7 days if the person is going to develop symptoms at the 10, 13, or 14-day mark. But what I'm hearing is that it's not actually that way.
Correct, it's not that way.
All right, thank you.
I do have one more question. I'm sorry I said I didn't have any more, but I do. So you were saying that maybe there should be a different plan if we got into low or medium, but then maybe we're saying no, stay the course. What's the recommendation if by a miracle we end up in a lower transmission rate like relatively soon? Would we recommend to change that? Or
honestly, with the numbers where they're at, Friday it was 114 that have to get under 50 in the next 29 days. I'm not that optimistic based on what we're seeing in the district. So, we could possibly entertain it, but I don't project that would be the case. I would be hopeful that happens over the summer if more people get vaccinated and we reduce the community transmission through vaccination and through the vaccination of our 16 and overs. I'm hopeful that can happen, and I'm hopeful coming into the next school year that would be more of an option. But I still feel strongly that our transmission rates are just too high right now to take that chance.
Do we have any sense of how the vaccinations for the 16 and older is going in Chester County, and specifically our students?
No, we don't have any. We don't have any sense there. Once our own vaccine clinic opens, then we'll have a sense of how many students participate in that. But we don't get that information.
That's something that we should consider for next school year, is collecting data on students who are of an age that are eligible to receive a vaccine and whether they're vaccinated.
We haven't heard, I don't think, Mrs. Weber, we've heard anything from the state about collecting that vaccine information. Have you?
It's not required of us right now, but I do know that it's on the high school nurse's radar, and she's kind of keeping track informally of who's vaccinated.
So we are prepared if it becomes required?
Oh, I have not heard that the vaccine is going to be required for school. No.
Okay.
I would think, Jennifer, you're going to have a much larger privacy issue that's going to be battled out at a much higher level than the school board, if that were come into
I
be
know
the case.
there are other vaccines that we're required by law to keep track of, though. So, you know, I was thinking that I guess we have the structures in place to do it if it were to become a requirement.
Oh, yes, we have the structures in place if it becomes a requirement, for sure.
Okay.
I think I did hear that the vaccine for 12-year-olds is now available as of either today or this coming Friday. Have you heard anything about that? I'm not sure it relates directly to here, but it's just something I thought I'd ask.
I have not heard anything. Have you, Mrs. Weber? I mean, I know that it's up for approval, but I haven't heard anything.
Okay.
It
No,
will be allowed, according to the news environment, it's going to be allowed starting early next week, 12 to 15-year-olds.
Okay, I guess that's what I saw at one point.
And our students turn in their vaccination cards for extra credit in their classes. Just a thought.
Mine could use it.
Putting it out there, teachers. Just kidding.
All right. Any other comments on this topic or discussion on this topic from the board?
I have a question on the health and safety plan that's not related to quarantining. Is that okay to ask now or no?
Yeah.
I know that a lot of the, troubles that the youngest students are having are regarding face masks when it's hot out. And I know that we are, under this governor's mandate that we can't not allow them to wear them. But I also know that the governor's order does allow for a face mask to be taken off outside where you can maintain distance. And I just had been hearing from other districts that they were allowing students to go to designated areas at recess time so they could be distant and be able to get a break from the face mask. And I'm wondering if that's something we could consider with hot temperatures. Obviously, the principals would probably have to create the methodology for how to make that occur. But I just was thinking about that as it's getting really warm out, that might be something that we could implement.
Mr. Smith, if you're still with us, can you comment about what the elementary schools, how they're giving mask breaks during recess?
Really, it's dependent upon the teacher and the students, what they're doing. I think we've employed a lot of common sense, and if the kids are running around and need a break, then each building has a bit of a designated area. The recesses are light anyway, because mostly by grade level. But if a child needs a break, they just talk to the adult or the staff member on site right there. And like I said, common sense isn't dead. We try to employ it quite often. And so every situation is probably a little bit different, but at the end of the day, if a child needs a break, they get it.
Okay, great. That's good to hear.
Yeah, I would just, thanks, Mr. Smith. Sometimes the world of policy and regulations does not lend itself to common sense. So I appreciate your pointing that out, that flexibility exists.
If you deal with second graders and first graders, they remind you quite frequently that common sense needs to be employed every day.
That's good.
Any other discussion? All right. Okay, Mrs. Prophet. Looks like we are at the point where the community can ask their questions. I would recommend that we do this by topic so that it's not a big free-for-all. So how about we will first take questions that have to do with next year's Cyber Academy. Then from there, we would go to the buildings and grounds for questions on the Giza project and any questions that have to do with the investment grade audit. Then we would go to finance, questions on the budget. After that would be questions on the district goals, and then any questions about health and safety plan. So the very first question, so that way Dr. Soder makes sure she takes her camera off, would be about the Cyber Academy for next year. So Lisa, I see you have your hand raised. So you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your questions about the Cyber Academy.
Hi, Dr. Lloyd and the board. Before I ask my question, I do want to acknowledge that it is Teacher Appreciation Week, and a massive shout out to all of our teachers, Ms. Kaminsky and Mrs. Whitlinger, and Dr. McClellan, particularly for me. So my question for around education, and it's not specifically Cyber Academy, but I did hear that there was some unhappiness with Accelerate. And both of my children are in Cyber Academy this year. One's in first grade, one's in third grade. Assuming, and we are intending to send them back to brick and mortar classroom next year at French Creek. Will they, do I have to be concerned that they will be behind based on our discomfort with Accelerate when it comes to bringing them back into the traditional OJR curriculums?
I don't think that you'll need to worry about that. We were using Accelerate with both our in-person and our cyber students at the elementary this year. So no, we are just wanting to fully return to using our programs that we've been using in the past for language arts and mathematics. But no, I would not find that our students who were in cyber would be behind.
Mrs. Prophet, the next person is April Sabo.
Hi, Dr. Lloyd and the board. I do also want to do a shout out to for Teacher Appreciation Week. We have amazing teachers, past, present, and our future current students. So thank you guys so much. Can't say enough great things. I wanted to ask about, it was recommended that a current principal would possibly be the new cyber principal for grades 3 through 12. Does this mean that they be responsible for their current school plus the cyber school? What assistance would that principal be given, and would they be compensated for something like that?
So no, they will not be responsible for a school building. They will just be responsible for the Cyber Academy. That was a big takeaway this year. We're lucky Mr. Smith is still alive and with us because he was the one that had to do both. And so we heard his pleas for help. And the number of students that are interested in the Cyber Academy ends up being about the size of a small school, K to 12. So the Cyber Academy would have the same supports and services that a regular school has. So,
Mrs. Prophet, the next person is Jason Miller.
Hi, I was wondering what percentage of the school budget is going to the cyber learning, and how many children you expect to enroll next year, and what proportions that works out as far as percentage going to cyber, percentage going to regular schooling, percentage of kids in cyber, percentage in regular schooling.
Well, Jason, Mrs. Crumrine loves to talk numbers. And so I'll have her join this conversation.
Sure, I'm happy to. Right now, the actual school district budget is not going towards cyber instruction, other than if there are shared duties among our staff, for like Mr. Smith, for example. We have grant funding that is supporting anything extra that we need for this year, above and beyond our regular general fund budget. Now, I know you had some other questions in there too. And I'm not sure exactly what they were. They were percentages of students, I believe. Is that what you're looking for, Dr. Lloyd?
And so I'm looking for that data. So right now we know that at the high school level, we have 102, I'm sorry, secondary level, we have 102 students that parents already have said that they would like them to remain in the Cyber Academy. We have 36 that are uncertain. So we want to make sure that we are cognizant of those students. And then at the elementary level, we have another 160 that want to remain in the Cyber Academy, and we have 31 students that are uncertain. Jason, one of the things that is really important is that we don't lose our students to the cyber charters. And that's why it's incumbent upon us to try to develop or continue anyway the cyber program that we have. And Mrs. Crumrine, you want to talk a little bit about that? You mentioned that a bit about that we know that if we don't offer a cyber program, 80 students will go to a cyber charter, and that's where the impact is. So can you just talk a little bit about that for Jason?
Sure. Jason, so when students choose to go to a charter cyber school, we are required to pay that tuition to that. So we have to use taxpayer dollars to pay tuition to a charter cyber school. And so if the average between special ed and regular ed tuition a year is $19,000, then you're looking at a little over $1.5 million that would automatically go right out the door to pay for their tuition. So it behooves us to have an attractive program in-house because we can do it for less.
Okay, the next person is Carrie Kane.
Hi, Carrie.
Hello, yes, thank you. I just had a question about the BVA. I was curious if a contract with BVA would result in a loss or decrease of the current OJR teacher jobs.
Go ahead, Dr. Soder, that's for you.
I don't anticipate that. Given how we are planning this, we would like our own teachers to be providing as much instruction as possible. So I wouldn't expect that even if we have a contract with BVA or another third-party vendor, that would result in the loss of jobs. We would want the students to be taking classes with our own teachers, which is why we are moving forward with developing our own courses for them to take in the coming year.
Okay, Mr. Miller has his hand raised.
Sorry, I muted and then it wouldn't let me unmute again.
Oh.
So that 0% of the budget right now, does that continue into next year?
We have grant funding that will take us through June 30th of 2024. So we're working on a plan right now, once we know the particulars, to utilize a portion of that grant funding for cyber instruction through that time period, depending on the cost estimates and what is available. So after that, though, the board would need to build that into the budget.
So it would be brought up again once funding would have to come from the taxpayer.
Sure, and really it should be discussed every year as we're building the budget and renewing the projections for the outlying years, because we don't look at just 1 year, we look at the next year and then the 3 following years. So we'll be talking about it again every year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. All right, our next set of questions were for the Building and Grounds Committee, and that's where we talked about the Giza project and our energy conservation. And do we have any questions for the Buildings and Grounds Committee? It's Dr. John.
No public comment for that, Dr. Lloyd.
Thank you. The Finance Committee, tonight we talked about the budget for the next school year that the board will be voting on later this month. Any questions about next year's budget?
We have Lisa Yost. Lisa, you are unmuted.
You have to click on your mic there, Lisa.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Sorry, second question. It was a packed meeting. So I think I heard something about deferment of capital expenses, which I can certainly understand in the current year, given all of the challenges. But in the long run, you know, that can really come back to haunt you. So I just wanted to get a bit more clarity around how that is intended to be managed going forward, and if I heard that correctly.
That's great. I think that Lisa should get a gold star because nobody ever asked a detailed question like this. So Mrs. Crumrine, I know you want to talk about this deferring.
Absolutely. We're not deferring expenses. We're deferring the transfer. By board policy, we are required to transfer 1 mil of real estate taxes, which is approximately 2.4 million. It's built into the budget. Goes from the general fund to the capital fund. We're only delaying or defraying that for 1 year. It is built back into the budget projections that we showed you tonight so that it will be back in by 22-23. So it's just 1 year.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And I guess something to catch up on next year.
Sure. Yep.
All right. Next topic was the district goals, the update on the district goals.
Dr. Lloyd, no public comment on that topic.
I think you were.
We got one more. We got one.
Too quick, Mr. Sanfran.
Sabo?
This is Sabo, her name is.
Sabo.
Hello, April Sabo again. I just had a quick question. Will the curriculum review also include the integration of a more diverse curriculum when it's reviewed? And will we receive an update? Like, I apologize, the slide went quickly, but I believe I saw something that you'll be updating us on the strategic plan for the SEL curriculum. Will we receive that same type of update when we're talking about equity?
And so, Dr. Soto, you want to talk about the curriculum piece first?
Sure. So we have a curriculum revision cycle that is a 5-year process. So every year we are reviewing a different subject's curriculum. When we do that subject, we look at a number of different components for that revision, how the curriculum is aligned to standards, is it addressing current assessments, does it have appropriate cultural diversity? So those are things that are done every year with a specific curriculum. And if we have a need that's outside of that curriculum cycle, then we address it. For example, we have the opportunity to have an outside consultant work with our school district specifically for our social studies curriculum. And we're going to be beginning that work this summer and into the fall. And so even though that's off cycle for our social studies curriculum, we have this opportunity and we're going to be taking advantage of it. Another example would be that we took a very close look at the novels and the read aloud books that are used in our language arts curriculum. And those were things that were updated last year and throughout this year, seeking greater diversity in those titles. So this is an ongoing process. I can share that next year our revision area is actually mathematics. And so while this is something that we can review when we are looking at the assessments and standards for that, we recognize that English and social studies probably have more connection with having cultural diversity embedded in the curriculum. And so that's really going to be the emphasis of our work.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much.
And then the second part of your question about equity. So the The school district has an equity action plan, and they are at the point of where they have to develop the policy for equity in the school district, and then they develop a plan for going forward. And so I anticipate that the next superintendent will be communicating that plan out. The legislative and policy committee are continuing to develop their policy that was on the action plan, and hopefully hope to complete it this year. I'm not sure whether or not we're going to actually get there, but that's definitely going to be the work that the next superintendent will pick up
They
with.
also have a meeting on May 11th. I believe Sanford, Jennifer's muted. They have a meeting on.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to invite everybody to tune in May 11th because we're hoping, because we've had several discussions on this policy, we are hoping that this may be the final draft on May 11th. So we definitely want to hear community input before then if we have it, because it would be really exciting to be able to get it on first reading for the May meeting and then second reading for June so that we could actually have it adopted by the end of June. But it does include, putting a diversity goal as part of the annual goals, as Dr. Lloyd had recommended in her goal presentation.
Tammy Hartman.
Hi, Tammy.
Hello. So this school district has done a great job this year with providing various trainings for sessions for diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm curious, has the school board participated in any of these training sessions, or have they pursued any of that education on their own?
Mrs. Prophet, would you like to speak to the training that the school board has participated in?
So we've done PSBA training. We started the past summer with that. I know many of the board members, including Dr. John and myself, have attended sessions throughout the school year. And I know that our board members always have ongoing training, especially with their current companies that they work for too. So it's definitely it's an ongoing goal for the school board as well.
Mm-hmm. So the Pennsylvania School Board Association is who helped us get all of this started. And so they provided the initial training. Then they did a follow-up training for the board. And I'm certain that when the new superintendent starts, there's additional training. But first, they needed to get their policy written before they take the next step with PSBA.
Mr. Miller.
With diversity, equity, and inclusion, it doesn't sound like any curriculum has been created yet, but before that curriculum is presented to the students, will it be presented to parents to decide whether they want their students to participate or not?
So Dr. Soder oversees curriculum. And so you wanna jump in here?
So we don't have a separate curriculum for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are looking for the natural connections for those topics in our current subjects. We do have a social and emotional learning component that is in our school district that isn't necessarily connected to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this as a goal is something that would be ongoing, that you would be looking at as you are developing or revising curriculum. It isn't something necessarily that's separate. There wouldn't necessarily be separate lessons for that for our students. And anyone who has an interest or wants to see the curriculum documents, we have the scope and sequence documents on the public side of our website. And if parents want to see the more detailed one that's really kind of used for teaching purposes, that's something that I can make available to them.
There currently are what we call in education canned programs. And so there are currently canned programs for equity and diversity and inclusion, and ONJ does not currently utilize one of those programs. It's not to say that they won't in the future, it's just that right now we don't currently use that, and there hasn't been really a request by the school board that we add that at this time. Anything else, Jason?
Next person is Emily Wunderlich.
Hi, my name's Emily. I'm a student at OJR. I just wanted to more continue on what Dr. Lib was talking about the programs. I just was wondering, is the school board open to attending some of those meetings and discussions? I just want to hear more about that. Like if you guys are going to be attending more in the future.
So PSBA is constantly providing educational offerings for school board members. I know many do participate in them. We are required, I believe, Dr. Litt, I'm not sure how many hours it is of training school board members are required to take a year, but there is requirement training that is required hour-wise. And I know that many of our board members are actively interested in the topics and continue to participate in anything that's involved in the district or outside.
No more hands raised for this topic.
All right, and then our last part of our meeting had to do with the health and safety plan. And so at this time, we will take any questions about the health and safety plan.
Dr. Lloyd, I gave my teacher wait time and no one has their hand raised.
What? See, you were too fast. Mr. Miller has a.
Mr. Miller's back here. I think he got disconnected from the last one.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Jason.
I just wanted to make a comment, not really a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Yep.
I was just making a comment more than a question. As a child, as a father of children that are in elementary school, I would say that it's good that you guys allow breaks if they ask for breaks when they're outside in the heat. But I would also say a lot of times children of that age don't think about or want to leave play to take a mask break, and the chances of transmission outdoors being low, it just seems like something we should take a look at as far as allowing or setting time aside where we can say, hey, you can go and take your mask off, rather than you need to come to me and tell me you want to take your mask off.
Well, your point is well taken. What I know from being a former elementary school teacher is that teachers sometimes have to do exactly that. But our teachers and our paras that are out at recess are watching and monitoring our students closely, and they can tell, when they're getting flushed and when they're getting overheated because they've been running and racing around at recess, which is what we want them to do. And so I am quite certain that our teachers say to different children, I think it's time for your mask break now. Why don't you go over there and take your mask break? But our students are very good. It's amazing how well our students have adapted to wearing masks and to giving themselves a break when they need it. But teachers definitely encourage that when they see, when we're outside in this hot temperatures and see that the student needs to even just physically stop running and take the mask off and take a break. But we also know that our children don't want to be in a spot 6 feet away from their friends and not be able to play with them. But it's available, and we have been utilizing it. So thank you for your comment.
Dr. Lloyd, if I could just add one thing, and that is being Teacher Appreciation Week and thinking about some of the topics that we discussed tonight. If we go back 12 months ago and think about when we put those district goals together, for example, or we even began talking about a health and safety plan, it's always easy to look at the rearview mirror and say, gee, we should have gotten to this, or maybe we should have prioritized that. I just want to compliment you, the admin team, and all the teachers for the flexibility that's been displayed. And we're certainly not out of it yet, but we're certainly a lot closer to it than we were a year ago. So thanks for all that you've done. I think as a board, we need to look with your input at some of those district goals that we were just prevented from getting to last year, to think about how we incorporate those when Dr. Stout comes on board. But just wanted to say thanks for all that you and the team and the entire staff have done, as well as our families and our students, and kind of riding this thing along with us.
I hope that as I was presenting, you were thinking about, gosh, I've heard about this all year long. That's what goals are meant to be. We're meant to be laser focused on them. And when we attain those goals. We had some things that prevented us from doing some of what we had thought, when we set those goals, but we achieved other things instead of those particular goals. And after all, I think the board wisely changed the format of goals to be 1 and 2 years, to say, if you can't get everything done in 1 year's time. So, but we got accomplished an awful lot this year.
We did.
All right, so we're gonna adjourn tonight's meeting, and then I just want to remind the board, we are now moving to that new committee structure, and that new committee structure will be on the website so that the public can see that as well. And so that LMP meeting, Jennifer, then on the 11th, you will have your new committee members, but I mean, everyone kind of joins in anyway, so you're stuck with all of us anyway. All right, have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.